Hi guys, welcome back to another fractions video. In this video we are looking at adding and subtracting fractions with different denominators. In the previous video we looked at the same idea of adding and subtracting fractions, but that was when we had the denominator the same. So if we look at these two fractions here, we have 1/2 and 1/3. Now when we add and subtract fractions, and this is our golden rule, we have to make sure the denominator is the same. So when adding and subtracting fractions, the denominator must be the same. So we have to change the fractions a little bit or find equivalent fractions so that the denominators are the same. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So to make the denominators the same, we must first find the LCM of both the denominators. Now you should know how to find the LCM, but I will show you again. So 2 and 3, that's our denominator is 2 for this one because it's 1/2 and 3 for this one because it's 1/3. Now what goes into both of these? Well, 1 goes into both of these, that's it, that's our highest common factor. So what we get left with, well, 1 goes into 2 twice and into 3 3 times. So if we remember, for finding the lowest common multiple, we multiply these three numbers that make the L shape and they equal 6. So 1 times 2 is 2 and 2 times 3 is 6. So our lowest common multiple is 6. Okay, so remembering our golden rule, when adding and subtracting fractions, the denominator must be the same. So let's look at changing these fractions so that they have a denominator of 6. And what we ask ourselves is, what do I need to multiply this denominator of? So 2, what do I multiply 2 by to make it equal 6? And I multiply 2 by 3. So essentially I'm doubling both halves. So we had here 1/2, and now we have to times that by 3 to make it equal 6. So we multiply the numerator by 6 as well. So we end up with 1, 2, 3 out of 6. And if we look at the shapes shaded, we've still got half of the shape shaded. Okay, so there's no change in that. We've just cut it into more pieces essentially. Now we're going to do the same with the second fraction. So if we have 1/3, what do I multiply 3 by to make it equal 6? I multiply it by 2. That was a terrible multiplication sign. So 1 times 2 equals 2. And 3 times 2 equals 6, so we end up with 2 6s. So we've got 3 6ths plus 2 6ths. And you can see again that the shaded part represents the same amount. Okay, we've just cut it into more parts. Now, like when we were adding and subtracting fractions with the same denominator, we can simply add the numerators now. So 3 plus 2 gives us 5, so we have 5 parts out of 6 shaded. Let's look at doing this with some actual fractions instead of shapes. So 9/10 plus 1/2. So again, we need to have those denominators the same. So what we're going to do is put our 10 and our 2 in our little L bracket. Now, what is the highest common factor, or what is a factor of 2 and 10? Well, a factor of 2 and 10 is 2. Now 2 goes into 10 5 times and into 2 once. So again, we're going to multiply these three numbers together, and 2 times 5 is 10, and 10 times 1 is 10. Now, we get the lowest common multiple of 10. Sometimes the denominator of one of them can be multiplied to equal the denominator of the second one, but that's not always the case, as we'll see in our next example. So our lowest common multiple of 10, well, we don't have to do anything to the 9/10 because the denominator is already 10. But we have to multiply 2 by something to make it equal 10, and that's 5, so we end up with 5/10. So 9/10 plus 5/10, and that gives us 14/10. Now remember, we're working with fractions and we leave them in our simplest form, which means, well, 10 goes into 14 once and gives us 4/10 left. And again, we can still simplify them both down because 2 goes into both of them. And you can do this in the same method as we've used here. You could have 10 and 4 here until you get to the lowest number that you can't find common factors for. And then you're going to use your highest common factor here. So 2 is the highest common factor of 4 and 10, so we end up with 2/5. Fantastic. Let's go on to the next one. So 2/3 plus 5/10. So we've got our 3 and our 10. Actually, I'm going to pause it there. I want you to do this one. Okay, so hopefully you've done the same thing as me. So 3 and 10, the highest common factor here is 1. So 1 goes into 3 times and into 10 times. Now sometimes we can't find a factor higher than 1, and that's okay. We still just do the same thing of multiplying our leftover numbers. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 3 times 10 is 10, and we end up with the lowest common multiple of 30. So what do I have to multiply this fraction by to make the denominator equal 30? And that's 10. So I'm going to multiply this whole fraction by 10. So the top would be 20 and the bottom would be 30. Now what do I do to this fraction here to make the denominator equal 30? Well, I multiply it by 3. So what I end up with is 20/30ths plus 15/30ths. So if I add these together, I end up with 35/30ths. And again, we leave this in simplest form, so 1 and 5/30ths, which still isn't the simplest form because we end up with 1 and 1/6, because 5 goes into 5 once and into 30 6 times. Let's do an example with subtraction. We do it in exactly the same way as we have been, and then we just subtract the numerators. So let's find the highest common factor of 4 and 5, the lowest common multiple of 4 and 5. So the factor that goes into 4 and 5 is 1. 1 goes into 4 times and into 5 times. So we end up with 4 and 5. Let's multiply these out and we end up with 20. So our lowest common multiple here is 20. What do I have to multiply this fraction by to make the 4 equal 20? So 4 times 5 gives us 20. So 3 times 5, well, that gives us 15. So we end up with 15/20ths. And then what do I have to multiply this fraction by to make it equal 20? Well, I'm going to multiply it by 4. And so what I end up with is 4 on the top and 20 on the bottom. So we end up with 15/20ths take away 4/20ths. Now if I was to then subtract our numerators, what we end up with is 11/20ths. Remember, when the denominators are the same in addition and subtraction, we don't have to do anything. Okay, we just write the denominator down. And now I'm going to pause, or I want you to pause this, do this next question, part D, and then come back and we'll do it all together. Fantastic. So hopefully you've got the same answer as we're going to get now, but let's go our 4 and our 10. And we're looking for a factor that goes into both. Now always try to find a factor greater than 1. Sometimes like over here, there was no factor greater than 1, but this one here has a factor of 2. Now 2 goes into 10 5 times and into 4 twice. So we have our lowest common multiple here, and what we do is 2 times 5, which is 10, and 10 times 2, which gives us 20. So our lowest common multiple is 20. So what do I have to multiply this first fraction by to make the bottom 20? Well, I'm going to multiply it by 2, so I end up with 8/20ths. And this one here, what do I need to multiply the fraction by to make the 4 equal 20? Well, I'm going to multiply that one by 5 so that I get 5/20ths. So what I end up with is 8/20ths take away 5/20ths. And our final answer there should have been 3/20ths. I hope you got that correct. If not, that's okay. If you're unsure of anything, please do ask. We want you to make sure you get these concepts. So anyway, thanks for watching and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.